Hello, everyone. Welcome to ELI, the place where you get your daily dose of inspiration for entrepreneurship. And today we have with us Ramnath Iyer, who is the co-founder of ESG Data Solutions. Hi, Ramnath. Welcome to ELI.
Thank you for having me, Priya.
I would request you to introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about the venture you have built, and also set up a context for us to understand the market. Like we don't understand what is ESG and what is ESG data. Set up a context for us.
Definitely, Priya. So, a little bit about myself. I'm one of those geriatrics who spent nearly 28 years in the financial services industry. I started from the bottom of the pyramid, where I started out as an analyst working with a company called CRISIL. There, I used to build financial models. I used to write out project reports. I used to work with governments across the world. Here, the underscoring is across the world because CRISIL gave me an early opportunity to work in Africa, to work in Europe, and in a number of other countries where they were trying to push public-private partnership on infrastructure projects.
Mhm,
And as my journey progressed, I moved on from advisory roles in CRISIL, where I used to advise governments on how to attract private investments, to doing assessment of financial instruments, where we looked at the rating of financial instruments, where I used to work with CRISIL's operations team, trying to scale the business for them. So that is where I think bulk of my understanding of the financial industry happened, where I understood how the investors look at borrowers and then what are the criteria they use to assess borrowers' financial credibility. It
mhm,
is in that point of time that I learned that the financial assessment is not really numbers driven, but there is a fair amount of influence that your business factors have. And one of the key business factors that influenced credit decisions was governance in the company.
mhm,
From there, I moved to IT because without IT as a backbone, you can't really scale up operations. In fact, you can't scale up an organization without IT as a backbone. And
correct.
then I used to work with running the technology team for CRISIL for almost 5 years. And from then on, I moved on to MSCI, where I used to run their global operations team for index, real estate, and ESG.
Mhm,
At that point in time, I had a couple of eureka or aha moments where the penny dropped. The first thing that I realized is that the industry is going to go through a huge change. Now let us look back to 1980s, right? In 1980s, computers were just about gaining traction, and everybody realized that using computers can scale up the human activity substantially.
right.
And that was a turning point. Most of the companies that set up software services or products from then on had a different kind of growth or story.
Mm,
So every couple of decades, such an opportunity comes in the industry. So in the next few decades, two things are going to really drive huge amount of change. So we've seen computers drive change, but computers have to be programmed. Decades, what we are going to see is first, program is going to take a back seat and artificial intelligence is going to take precedence. So instead of trying to program a computer to do specific tasks, people will tell the computer, this is the task I want to execute, or please help me achieve the following outcomes. And then the computer will try and using whatever learning it has, try and give you the outcomes. And we have already seen ChatGPT do that. And we are seeing a number of other AI tools achieve the same. So next 2 decades, if you ask me, one big change that is going to influence our life substantially is AI. The second big change is responsibility. Now, it is not just responsible investment, but it is also responsible consumption. We are seeing more and more people trying to forsake plastic bags. We are seeing more and more people trying to shift to EV vehicles. We are seeing more and more people trying to consume more responsibly, not buy things that you want to waste or not buy things that will create a lot of plastic and damage the environment. So this is personal responsibility that people are espousing. Even at home, we are segregating garbage. The same thing is expected out of organizations. So organizations are now required to say that I will behave more responsibly to the environment. I will be more responsible to the society, and I will be more responsible to the stakeholders. So when it is environment, it is called E of the ESG. Society is the S of the ESG, and to stakeholders is the governance part of the ESG. So if every company is expected to behave more responsibly, then it is only natural to say that the organizations
Mm-hmm.
will be held accountable on their responsibility practices. And if the organizations are to be held accountable, there are two entities that have to hold the organization accountable. One is the regulators that sort of tell the organizations how to behave. Now, if you are taking listed companies in India, SEBI is a regulator. So,
Mm-hmm.
what does SEBI do? SEBI has already come out and said, listen, you have to publish more disclosures, and they put out a framework called BRSM. And the second is the people who give money to the company. So it is whether it is the shareholders or the banks. These are the two sources of funds. So these two sources of funds are the funding institutions, whether it is individuals as shareholders or the banks as fixed income lenders, are going to hold the companies accountable. So what ESGDS tries to do is tries to say that a company's performance can be looked at or has to be looked at differently depending on which hat you're wearing. The way an equity investor will look at a company's ESG accountability will be different to the way a bank looks at the company's ESG accountability, will be different to the way its consumer looks at ESG accountability. For
Mm-hmm.
example, Apple's consumer will tell Apple, listen, you will have to give me more recycled products.
Mm-hmm.
But what about Apple treating its employees fairly? So we always know that there are employees who are working for Apple but are not on Apple payroll. Foxconn being an example. So
Mm-hmm.
is Foxconn treating its employees fairly, which is a vendor to Apple? So these are the questions that institutional investors will ask. So our business proposition is to answer the questions that these stakeholders have using data and high-end analytics. And the reason we set up this company is threefold. One, we know that bulk of the economy growth is going to happen in the Asian region.
Mm-hmm.
So the APAC is going to be the growth engine for the world. The more developed markets are sort of mature and we are seeing low single digit growths here. Asia is supposed to be the growth engine with high single digit, almost double digit growth. But are Asian companies evaluated adequately given that they're critical part of the supply chain? We found the answer to be no. Not all Asian companies are large market caps, so they are not part of world indexes, so they are not being evaluated, which means a large part of the contributor to the environment change is not being assessed appropriately. So that not only gave a business opportunity, but was also close to heart because we come from a country that is going to drive the growth. And if our country does not have enough institutions that evaluate the performance of companies, then there is also shame on us, right? How are we going to grow if you're not going to grow responsibly? So that was a business opportunity, also a personal compulsion, saying, why should we let this opportunity pass when it is also the right thing to do? So that was one big driver for setting up EHDA. The second big driver is the fact that while we are not the largest economy, our regulators are fairly proactive. So
Mm-hmm.
while the world is still trying to see how to regulate, and when I'm saying the world is still trying to see how to regulate, we still don't see regulation in US that mandates disclosure. We still don't see regulation in US that requires mutual funds to adopt certain assessments to disclose whether they're true to purpose and so on. But India, that regulation has already come in being. So our regulators are far more proactive, or rather quite proactive for a developing country. So that means again there is a business opportunity that the regulation is creating. And the third is if you look at it objectively, the data factory to the world, like you had the manufacturing factory of the world come from China, the data factory and the IT factory for the world is India. So if there is
Correct.
anything that is to be done in data, if there is anything that is to be done in analytics, the gravitation is towards India. And only if India can't fulfill that need, you see that the offices get opened elsewhere in Poland, Hungary, and so on. So then we said, okay, all three stars have now aligned. There is an opportunity. It is the right thing to do. India is a growing space and the market is ripe. And this is going to be a 30-year story because everybody is going to be more responsible. And if not, then there is going to be a 2-degree increase in temperature and all of us will not have civilization the way we are used to living. So given that everything is aligned, we said it is the right opportunity. And as I said, I'm a geriatric. I had a midlife crisis. All of us talk of being entrepreneurs right from the beginning, right from school days. What do you say when you have your first interview? I want to open a business. What do
Mm,
you tell your children? Saying, "Oh, I am not financially secure, but the moment I am financially secure, you will probably have me open a business for you." So these stories we keep saying, but what is the point of telling a story if you can't act on it? So these were the drivers for creating AGDS, and our business is really to shape the financial analytics and analytical tools that are being used for assessing an institution's responsibility practices.
mm.
Sorry, a long-winded answer to a short question.
So, one thing I just want to understand from you, like the initial days of building this venture, when did you think of, let's build a venture? I have found a problem statement. This is a good business opportunity. When did that moment came? One like the eureka moment for your venture, and what were the initial set of things that you did to set up this venture?
Okay, so the first Eureka moment, and again, no venture is born on a specific day, right? It is an ideation that finally fructifies. So, just between the listeners and us, my first thought of starting a venture was way back in 2000. So, the idea was that there is a fair amount of IT that is going to get federated thanks to the internet. So there the idea was to really build a B2B portal which could facilitate private investment in infrastructure. But unfortunately, what happened at that time was that there was a dot-com burst, and subsequently everything that had a dot-com was nearly taboo. And then mobilizing funds, trying to get a team, etc., was proving to be a challenge. So
Mm,
that initiative sort of was stillborn. Then subsequently, I had the courage to think again and say, let's do something. And then the global financial crisis happened. The markets melted down. So in 2008, again, I had an idea to start something on the financial analytics space. With the global meltdown, it didn't transpire. Then finally, in 2020, I turned 50. So, right, there was this hump. So either you do it now or you don't do it for the rest of the life was the situation.
mm,
And then there were two things that happened while I was turning 50. So one, the pandemic, right? That gave you time. So that took the commuting time out from your
mhm.
life.
Right.
And given that the commuting time went away, that led me do another solid thinking for 3 hours or 4 hours a day, saying, how do you really action something which is just an idea? And obviously travel etc shut down, so there was no jet lag, there was no associated stress of trying to be in two different time zones simultaneously and manage different teams. So with these two things happening, which is no travel, local travel time, no global travel, which meant there was focused time, I could really take that idea off the ground. Now the initial hiccups were, like pandemic gave the benefit of the ability to think, the pandemic also gave a drawback of not being able to meet people, not being able to talk to clients and see if there is actually a business opportunity, not being able to meet team members who are interested in pursuing a similar idea, not being able to do some show and tell with a face-to-face meeting. So these were the drawbacks that the pandemic gave us. But
Mm,
fortunately for us, the upside was pandemic, similar to me, gave a lot of people thinking time. So most of them said, why am I in corporate? Let's
mhm,
just step out and do something. Let's just chase our dreams. And then when I started speaking to people, they just said, yes, this is the right thing to do. We'll sign up with you. And that was the tipping point when people who quit full-time jobs and said, Ramnath, we'll sign up with you. We are not going to take even 1/10 of the salary we are drawing, because we have faith in this idea and the fact that we can collectively execute. I said, let's now take the leap of faith, quit, and start this. So that was how the tipping point happened. It was not really my idea, it was the team's belief in the idea that helped me take the leap of faith and say, okay, it is time now to just stop sounding bombastic and saying we all want to be businessmen to actually doing something as a founder.
mm. Okay. You started a business and you had people joining with you. But how did you go about acquiring clients? Because they at the end of the day pay you, pay the salary of your employees. So how did you go about acquiring clients? What was the typical sales process like? Tell us about it.
Our typical sales process is anywhere between 4 months and 6 months. And the reason is because we usual ticket size for us is upwards of 35 lakhs. So we don't have a single client who pays us less than 35 lakhs for an engagement. And obviously people are not going to sign 35 lakh rupee, 50 lakh rupee checks without doing their due diligence over a period of time. So they take 4 to 6 months to do the due diligence. Now, why do they come to us? They come to us for three big differences. One, we have domain expert in the industry that is fairly hot and is growing fast. Finding the right experts is a big challenge. And we have a huge number of industry experts coming from companies like Refinitiv,
Mhm.
Standard and Poor's, etc., Citibank, and so on and so forth. I can just keep naming them, and you have all the heavyweights in terms of organization experience who are working with us. The second is that we don't do any activity with only people. Every activity that we do for our clients is backed by both people and technology. And that brings us to the third differentiator, which is because we are integrating technology in all our work processes, our quality levels are extremely high, which is not the typical industry standard. And the cost at which we can achieve the quality is also unparalleled. So every human is supported by technology, and a combination of human and technology helps us meet quality and price point levels which are typically unparalleled in the industry. And that is how we were able to get our initial clients. And after we got our initial clients, our work spoke for itself. So we are not having a big sales team. In fact, there are only two people who are selling today. And with two people, if we are able to get global clients, it's simply because our work speaks for itself. And we are able to showcase the kind of work we are done. And our client references then go in getting new clients.
Got it. Any big challenges so far while building and growing this venture?
Oh, a number of challenges. In fact, there are more challenges than opportunities. As I said, pandemic itself posed a number of challenges. We could hire the core team, or the core team came together, but then hiring the experts and ensuring that we are able to build the team and keep it cohesive remains a challenge today. Because we started in the pandemic, we have footprint over, let me just count the team members, right? One member sits in Gurgaon,
Mhm.
one sits in Jharkhand, the third sits in Lucknow, then there are 5 people in Mumbai. There are 200 people in Mangalore. There are 15 people in Chennai. Then there are people who are sitting in Rajamundry. There are people who are sitting in Coimbatore and so on and so forth. So bringing this kind of team together and ensuring that while they're working remotely, we are still cohesive was
Mhm.
a challenge. The other challenge is obviously even now, right? If you apply for a US visa, it will take anywhere from 6 months to 9 months for the visa to get stamped. So while we have clients in US and Europe, our ability to meet them face to face is still limited. So the effects of pandemic has not worn off. So it is still remote communication that we do with our clients. Then we had initially partnered, or my initial founder had some misalignment of goals. So we had to actually ensure that the misalignment doesn't carry on and we don't splinter as an organization. So we had to buy the initial founder out and say, okay, sorry, we are not aligned right now. So it's best to move forward individually. So that was another challenge. Then obviously the post pandemic, there was a tech spike, which means a
Mhm.
lot of talent in technology was being hired at unbelievable prices. And how do you
Right.
build a fintech company without technology experts? So that was another challenge. So you can keep asking me and I can keep naming challenges for you. But
Mm.
then the joy is because we overcome these challenges.
How would you compare entrepreneurship with a job that you did for I think 20 plus years?
So it's complementary. I'm sure that without working in large organizations, the ability to become an entrepreneur and implement in a structured way with commitments that are cast in stone, with the ability to manage a team professionally would be limited. So there is a lot you learn from large organization, the way you conduct yourself, the way you hold client meetings, the way you make commitments, the way you write proposals, the way you build a team, with the way you motivate the team, the way you recognize and reward, the way you structure an organization. All this comes through years of experience in large organizations.
Mhm.
But the joy of entrepreneurship is different. You answer to yourself, you are accountable to your team, you actually see wealth getting created. So if you ask me, I wouldn't have been. There are many people who do it. I wouldn't have been able to turn into an entrepreneur without the background of working in a large organization, which gave me a pedestal from which it was easier to take off. But if you ask me which is more joyful, being an entrepreneur or working for someone else, my obvious answer is being an entrepreneur. It carries more liabilities, but there is greater joy. You're building something that you want and you are seeing your team flourish. So that joy is different.
Any interesting lessons that you have learned as an entrepreneur, which we can also take away and probably apply to our ventures as well?
So the first important lesson I learned is the caution in taking funds from the market. We have seen a number of stories. When you see early success, people come with checkbooks and say that, listen, we are here to make investments. And because they give you what seems to be attractive valuation, there is always this temptation to say, okay, let us cash out a little bit and let us also take money and scale the company faster. There are two problems there. One, every check comes with strings, right? So you
Mm.
have to make commitments on paper on what you'll achieve. Those commitments, if they are not honored, then there is a lot of stick that comes along. And then it reduces your ability to be flexible and adapt to the market condition. So the most important lesson is be very careful in mobilizing funds. Don't take funds that come with instructions. And if you take funds, don't take it at valuations that become challenging later to achieve, because that becomes the greatest detriment and that causes governance issues, right? The moment you say that I have to meet that valuation, then you start doing things that you wouldn't have normally done as an entrepreneur. So my first advice to any budding entrepreneur is be a little more circumspect when you raise funding. And second suggestion to entrepreneurs is be obsessive about profits. There is no way that a company is going to run unless it makes money. People are not going to stay with you. People are not going to make money. You will not be able to reward your team. So keep a close eye on profits. And unless you remain profitable from day one, if you are a B2B company, then it is not a good business to be. Working capital issues will be there. At no point in time will you have cash flows match your requirements. So that is something you have to tide over. At the end of the year, the profitability has to be robust. And unless that is achieved, that venture is going to struggle at whichever point in time. And the third advice is be flexible, have zero ego. You will have to do things like deliver parcels to your clients yourself. We will not have office boys in the beginning. You have to go fetch your own printout. You are not going to have a secretary. You will have to schedule your own meetings. So the first thing you have to do when you become an entrepreneur is please forget about what you have been or what you expect to be. You're starting from zero or maybe negative, and get reconciled to that. And that is going to hold much more strength or provide more strength than anything else.
Mm. My final question, can you tell us what is the meaning of entrepreneurship for you? How would you define the term entrepreneur?
So that's a tricky one, right? I wouldn't want to say an entrepreneur who builds businesses. I wouldn't want to say an entrepreneur is someone who makes an impact. I would just say an entrepreneur is someone who has the passion of translating their dreams into reality, or implementing the vision they have and proving that their vision can actually may get into a product or get into the market. I mean, who are the greatest visionaries? If you ask me today, it is Elon Musk, right? He just said that what was a golf buggy can now actually be a car. And
Right.
he turned the entire industry on the head and said a golf buggy can indeed be a car. Or Steve Jobs, who said that we don't need an iPod separately, we don't need 5 devices separately, and we don't need a button phone. We need a phone that does everything. So those are visions. An entrepreneur, it doesn't matter whether you work for an organization or outside. You need to have a grandiose vision. That vision should be different to what is normally acceptable in the market. And you need to have the gumption to convert your vision into reality. So that is my definition of an entrepreneur.
On this note, we have come to the closure of the session. Thanks for joining, Ramnath. It was a pleasure to have you on our platform, and our best wishes for ESG data and solutions.
Thank you so much, Priya. Nice talking to you.
Thank you.